All right, should we go ahead and get started?
Should. I suppose I should remember not to say good morning. It's evening, middle of the night for some folks. So happy respective time of the clock, wherever you are.
Yes. So thank you everyone for joining. Like Garin said, good morning, good afternoon, good evening, depending on where you're tuning in from. Thanks so much for joining us. I'm Kimberly from the Iterable marketing team, and we're super excited to have you all here with us today. As marketers, I think many of you will agree that we often hear the words data, scale, optimization, and personalization. And it can be, a little daunting to try and effectively and efficiently weave that into your strategy. So to help break it down and show us exactly how you can do that, we're joined today by two industry experts, Garin Hobbs from Iterable and Sam Larsen from Mixpanel, which is an integration partner of ours. And they'll be sharing a 5-step framework that's really aimed at, one, empowering you to achieve optimization through iterations and a testing mentality, and two, encouraging you to really lean into your data and the changing demands of consumers so that you can better personalize your messaging and foster a deeper, more meaningful connection with your customers. Our hope is that you walk away with actionable tips that'll help set you up for success. We'd love to hear from you throughout the webinar, so feel free to join the conversation in the chat, and we'll address any questions that come up at the end during the Q&A session. And with that, I'll let Sam and Garin introduce themselves before they unpack the 5 steps to an effective growth marketing strategy.
Cool. Thank you, Kimberly. I'll kick off. So I'm Sam Larsen. Very nice to meet everybody. I'm Director of Growth here at Mixpanel. I'll give just a brief background on myself. So I'm a quantitative marketer focused on helping businesses grow. I have experience building and scaling effective growth teams in the B2B and B2C space with some specific experience within SaaS, FinTech, and offline services. I generally hang my hat on the analytics side of the business and believe that a laser focus on data and rapid decision-making drives businesses forward. Back, Garin?
Yeah, thanks, Sam. Hi, everyone. My name is Garin Hobbs. I'm the Director of Deal Strategy and Market Insights here at Iterable. I've got 21 years in marketing, having served both provider side, agency side, and brand side as well, with the vast majority of that time dedicated to email, cross-channel marketing. My focus now is working with both internal teams and most importantly our customers to enable and posture marketers to better understand the needs and expectations of their end customers and hopefully extract an optimal value and opportunity from their strategies as well as the technology that powers it. So as Kimberly mentioned, growth marketing has to some degree become one of these terms that's become slightly ambiguous, even a little confusing. So from our perspective, we thought it would be helpful to kind of reframe it, right? From our perspective, growth marketing is simply the practice of leveraging data to foster meaningful engagement, not response, but meaningful engagement. And most importantly, mutual lifetime value between brands and consumers. And today we're going to take you through the 5 steps that we've found critical to accomplishing that. Reviewing your current strategy, identifying the new cohorts that will help us understand a little more contextually about our customers. Using that then to create segments that matter. Finally, to execute individualize. No point in doing all of this if we're not actually going to deliver. And then, of course, testing and optimizing to understand what works best consistently, and most importantly, why.
All right, cool. So we understand that this is definitely a topic at the front of all of our minds. So we're going to begin today by asking everybody on the call here to weigh in on the central theme. Okay. So we're going to do a poll, and the poll is we'd like you to answer on a scale from 1, with 1 being the least to 5 being the most. How confident are you in your ability to use your data to drive value for your customers and your business? Okay. So Kimberly's going to help us kick off this poll here.
Wow, immediate uptake on that poll. Looks like we've got probably some statistical significance here already, so that's awesome. It seems like most folks are kind of sitting right in the middle. 3, kind of just sort of the mean seems to be the average there, where most folks feel confident, sort of 1 foot in, maybe 1 foot out, understand this is a moving target, and something you probably never feel entirely is complete.
Yeah, it's fun. It's actually a pretty normal distribution here with like the big bulk at the 3. This is fun to see. This is a good audience for today.
Excellent.
All right, cool. Yep. So just to summarize, I think we've reached roughly critical mass with this. But yeah, bulk of the folks are sort of in the middle with the 3. Would like to learn more. Don't feel like they're running in totally the wrong direction here, which is great. A couple people feel really, really strongly. A couple people like really want to learn deeply here. So a good mix and good level setting for today.
Excellent. So 90% of these folks will find some good value. My goal will be to impress the 3% that feel super confident with their data. So let's start with step one, right? So in a market where truly few brands offer an entirely unique product or service, a lot of marketers have discovered the most effective growth strategy to attract, engage, and retain customers is by delivering meaningful and value-based experiences. Not just holistically, but specifically personalized to the individual customer's needs, interests, and preferences. Now, in some cases, moving to a customer-centric approach means a significant shift in strategy, and for others, it's a simple shift in tactics. So to help illustrate the principles, I wanted to frame the discussion around the example of a meditation app, something with which most of us are likely familiar. So before we can think about what changes to our strategy might be most effective, it's really critical to review both the intent and the impact of our current strategy. And that begins by asking ourselves a few key questions. First, what type of relationship do we currently have with our customers? Secondly, what type of relationship do we want to have with our customers? And what's the space in between where we are and where we want to be? Most importantly, what type of relationship do our customers expect and need from us, the brand, right? Do we truly know our customers at that level? Do we have the data and the insights derived from that data to really understand folks at an individual level, as well as to understand what likely drives the bulk of our customers to us, right? Value is highly subjective. So next, we need to understand what metrics do we really care about moving the most in reviewing our strategy. Typically acquisition, retention, engagement share or compete for priority. So it's not probably too uncommon to see them all running alongside. Once we've identified these drivers, we need to do next is assess and determine what it's actually going to take to deliver on the strategy or the expectations of our customers. Is our current approach optimally attuned to achieving these goals? Are there any obvious gaps? Again, are we collecting the right data to deliver on that? Most importantly, or again, just as importantly, do we have enough trust, faith, and confidence in the data, in the truthfulness of the data that we've already collected? Do we have the right technologies in place to effectively target, personalize, and deliver experiences across all of our digital messaging touchpoints and mediums? And which metrics actually show the biggest opportunities for growth with just a little bit of focus, right? Where's the lowest hanging fruit where we can show the most immediate traction and gain? And lastly, what else is our analytics telling us about our biggest areas of addressable opportunity and what's most important to our customers?
Okay. So once you've thought through these things and you know what type of relationship you want with your customers and how you want to deliver value, I'm going to dive a little deeper into the metrics and how you want to drive off kicking that ideation process off. Okay. So in general, as Garin mentioned, the top metrics can be grouped into three categories: acquisition, engagement, and retention. So the thing to think through here is which of these categories are you really focused on? Most teams will focus on just one of the three. Some teams will focus on a couple of them, but you want to identify really which category you're focused on. And then, as Garin touched on, where's the most benefit for your business? Can you gain multiplier effects to your revenue stream by focusing on one particular area? Okay. So when you focus on that area, you'll want to start narrowing down the steps that feed that metric. There are typically anywhere from 2, 3, 4, 5 steps of a customer or prospect journey that feed that metric area. And you're going to want to look at those to identify the biggest opportunities. Where can you see the most gain by applying some attention? A way to think about doing this is look at your base conversion rates along each of these steps. Okay, and once you look at your base conversion rates from step to step to step, you want to compare that to market comps and rates, any rates along that funnel that look low to you, based on your experience, or there are places where you want to place a bet because it looks like something that you could get outsized gains from getting little wins there. Okay, and you're going to choose an area to focus on. Okay. All right. So once you know which specific metric you're trying to move, it's time to dig in deeper. Okay. Now, one of the fastest ways to drive real meaningful change is to focus on segmentation or cohort-specific tactics. All right. Now, I'll talk for a slide here on why this is important and why it can be effective. The short answer here is that there's typically a lot of opportunity with this. Companies tend to group communications campaigns and on together for a couple of reasons. One, it tends to just be easier, and oftentimes companies end up with process that's the result of the path of least resistance. Oftentimes there's a legacy process that hasn't been touched in a while, or hasn't had the spotlight of attention focused on it in a while. Or it's because nobody has chosen to dig into the data to unlock better cohorting. Maybe it hasn't been available. Maybe the skill set hasn't been there. Okay, but it's important. And the why behind this, I'll just give you two examples that should be pretty intuitive for everybody. Take a B2B SaaS product and think of like a one-size-fits-all messaging, communication, go-to-market strategy around this. But oftentimes there are two types of consumers in general. You'll have engineering type consumers for this product. They're there to help implement, get things set up, keep the machine running, keep the integration running. And then you'll have your marketers or product folks or the end consumers who really just want to use it, right? Like communicating to everybody the exact same way is going to be leaving some value on the table, both for the company and for the customer, okay? On the B2C side, take the meditation app example. Again, while everyone's using the same product and they're all consuming it, you're going to have groups like the novice cohort, and they need a lot of help. Where do I start on meditating? I need a lot of handholding here. And then you'll have experts who have done this for a long time, but they're really looking for things like, I need help tracking this or setting reminders or doing these things. Okay, very different. So how do we find and define these cohorts? How do you get started? Answer here, you got to get into your data. Okay. Now, I have a visual example from Mixpanel pulled up to the right here because Mixpanel makes identifying cohorts really, really easy. But whatever tool or process fits your company is going to work here. It starts at the data. All right. Now here's the process. The first step in this is you're going to want to hypothesize your potential cohorts. Okay. So just like we went through on the last slide, think through the different groups who might have different use cases or needs or preferred interactions with your product or experience. Okay. That's step one. Step two, take the behavioral metrics that would validate or disprove your hypothesis and start splitting those metrics based on your hypothesized cohorts. Okay, and you're looking for differences. The call out here is when you start, you're generally looking for pretty large groups that behave pretty differently. They're oftentimes easier to find at the beginning, and you tend to get more immediate gains from this process. Over time, though, or if you have really an enormous amount of data to work with, you'll want to work your way deeper and deeper into your niches in order to keep personalizing and driving gains. Okay. When you find your cohorts, you're going to want to define and lock them in for ongoing analysis and campaign deployment. Big call out here, the more thought you apply to this process in advance, so the more hypotheses you generate, the faster the analysis is going to be. You'll have less like thinking as you go. It'll be more just like set up, knockdown, set up, knockdown. Okay. Now, if you have a good product analytics tool like Mixpanel, which has breakdown and cohort features, this process is really fast, and you can cycle through exploring these cohorts, both simple and complex, pretty quickly. But if you don't, and even if you do, for that matter, advanced forethought in thinking about this, we'll have gains for identifying these cohorts. Okay.
Awesome, thanks, Sam. Now, once we've gained a better understanding of our audience and identified the cohort Sam just took us through, we can now start thinking about how to create segments that align our product and service offerings with what's most important to our customers. It's a little bit different than the way we might have done things traditionally. Moving to a customer-centric strategy means redrawing the lines, not just according to likes and preferences, which again can be very superficial just in their own fact, but leveraging the context behind those likes and preferences. What do they really mean, right? Using that understanding to deliver real value and strike the more resonant chords of intrinsic motivation, right? That's important. Extrinsic motivations like price, discount, free shipping, etc. It's a game of increasing ante. If it took someone 15% to convert this time, it might take 20, etc. for time after that. We're also relying upon sort of matching cycles of timing, right? When we send out an extrinsic motivation of price or discount or promotion, we're hoping to find somebody in cycle or in need for what it is that we have to offer. But when we move to these intrinsic motivations, again, what it means to someone, how it makes them feel, we help create the opportunity, and we're not having to rely on what have largely become the parlor tricks, again, of discount and promotion. Right? To understand sort of how to arrive at those insights, it's helpful to ask ourselves some important questions. First off, what's the primary value of my brand or product? In the case of our example of our meditation app, what we can choose from no less than a dozen different meditation apps out there. What's the value of mine specifically? Is it my price point? Is it the user experience I offer within the app? Is it convenience? Is it somehow easier to access than other apps? Or certainly, is it easier than going out and having a physical experience with meditation? Is it the access that it allows them, the access to lifestyle, to values? Are we shining lights in dark corners and otherwise demystifying something that may not seem entirely for them or for me, right? And again, going into that deeper trend of lifestyle, what aspect of lifestyles am I really enabling here, right? How will my product or service be used? Will it be used to reduce stress or anxiety? Is someone coming to or seeking meditation as an aspect of mental training or fitness? Is it really just about finding 5 minutes to disconnect and come to center in an increasingly fraught world? Is it part of a health plan to, lower my blood pressure? Or again, is it an aspect of a new lifestyle? Maybe I'm adopting more of a new age or vegetarian type of lifestyle. This is just something that seems to lend itself naturally to it. It's important to understand these distinctions, because if I speak to the person who's coming to reduce stress or anxiety about mental training or fitness or aspect of new lifestyle, that's likely to be a miss in relevance, right? And again, customer centricity means coming up with that one-to-one relationship, really understanding what drives someone to me so I can deliver exactly on that expectation. That's a very, very different motion than simply just flipping memberships for meditation apps, right? Delivering on the actual motivational values. And most importantly, what does it mean to each individual? How does it improve their life or fulfill a need or allow them, again, to live their values? How might it satisfy them emotionally or otherwise meet their preferences, right? Someone may be coming to you for all 5 of those things, or maybe any combination or just one, right? So what is it? So we can put everything in the context, again, of that actual driver. Now, once we understand that, sort of the core definitions of our new lines of segmentation, we also need to layer in the understanding of temporal factors. Are my segments and call to actions considerate of current events and the environment, everything going on around us, right? The events of 2020, if nothing else, have shown us that customer dispositions can change quickly and frequently. Need versus want. I mean, think about how COVID, just to use a tired example here, has financially impacted folks around the world. Some it has and some it hasn't. Should you really go chasing someone who might have lost their job last week with endless, abandoned cart requests? So understanding need versus want. Geo-specific impacts as well of everything we've seen this year. Some areas are under restriction, some areas aren't. Even within them, folks might feel different levels of confidence or comfort in going out. Just because the government or whoever says it's safe doesn't mean folks necessarily feel comfortable in going out and resuming some semblance of normalcy, right? Have new habits or preferences developed? Again, we all of us have just survived a period of scarcity where, I don't care where you are, you likely went to a grocery store or any other type of store and couldn't find some of the things that you're looking for. And you certainly probably couldn't find some of the brands that you might have favored in the past, so you switched to something else. Has that developed a new habit or a new preference or even a new priority? Relevance is it's a moving target, and it requires new considerations and cues to identify and then keep pace with these shifts in trend or priority. Some of the common signs, and though not an exhaustive list, a few of the most common signs might be, if you're an e-commerce retailer, for example, if purchases are shifting from higher to lower cost items, same category, could we probably infer that the user's priorities have shifted, or at least their financial priorities might have shifted, right? If in the case of our meditation app, if I'm seeing a unnatural or uncharacteristic drop in paid conversions and a corresponding uptick in free users, that might be indicating, again, the fact that a portion of my audience is likely financially impacted, and I should probably pivot to rethink some of my segmentation or calls to action there. Have purchases shifted significantly towards essentials and basic items and maybe away from luxury goods and nice to haves? Has there been a broad-scale decrease in engagement, however slight, right? Do I see that across a broad swath of my audience, indicating that, again, for other folks, there might be more important things on their mind? Have customer service and info inquiries increased? This is a very common sign during times of upheaval or uncertainty. Folks are looking for answers. They are naturally seeking more detailed or granular information and oftentimes the burden of that will in fact fall upon your customer service, your chatbots, what other utilities you put in place for info inquiries. And then, do we have in place the data collection tactics to actually power all of these understandings and help us draw these segments, right? There's a lot of different ways we can actually collect this data. Account profiles is a great one, right? We should be asking for a lot of this information at time of simple sign up or at time of full profile creation, certainly not making it mandatory. We want to keep the barrier of entry low, right? But whenever they don't fill out, we could then use to trigger progressive profiling in follow-up messages. We could use that to send them to surveys or polling where we seek to understand, again, these shifts in need or disposition. We can also lean a bit on our data, right? Data inference, reading between the lines and sort of drawing logical conclusions from that data. Subject lines, campaign performance data is a great way to leverage data inference. So if I'm testing different motivational words or emotive drivers in my subject lines, which one or theme resonates most specifically with a segment or a portion of my audience? It might be, it's time to meditate to disconnect versus it's time for your mental training, right? If I'm testing those and don't really understand what the preferences of my individual subscriber might be, I can look over the period of several messages and see which ones they've opened, which subject lines carry those drivers, and infer that might likely be their most intrinsic motivation. And of course, we need to be constantly looking at these things, at not just the data itself, but most importantly, the analytics to help inform, direct, and guide our decisions and find the lines of segmentation that matter now and are most relevant to what's going on around us. Segments are a great start to personalization, but they're certainly not the end game. In fact, the ultimate goal here is to take it one step further and individualize, or think of this as segments of one, right? Now that comes with layering multiple personalization elements to create an individualized context, as well as taking advantage and harnessing the power of everything we've talked about to this point. So again, not an exhaustive list, but some of the most important elements to consider might be subject lines. Can we leverage certain keywords, as I just said, to align the value with each individual? Taking that same theory or that same theme with subject lines and applying it to broader pieces of the actual copy within the message as well, right? So again, finding what resonates most. Images, fewer things are more evocative of an image, right, than an image, right? Again, a picture tells 1,000 words. So those should be personalized as well to reflect either the context or even personalize it to me, sort of where I am, what I'm most passionate about, or what's likely going on around me in my locale. The ordering or the priority of content, sort of where it ranks within the body of the message itself, right? So again, things that might be of topmost interest to me should rank toward the top, knowing that attrition is a very real factor of human behavior. And the more I have to scroll, the less engaged I'm likely to become. So let's boost the most attractive things up to the very top, right? To really grab and hold that attention for longer engagement. Product itself, not just which product to present, but to whom and how, and even taking the same product and couching it to align with what's most important to each person. Again, we gave that example with the meditation app, right? Disconnecting, sort of find your calm away from stress versus mental training. Again, very, very different sort of purposes that might drive people to the same activity. And this, similar to the product, the call to action itself. And again, not just which CTA to send to whom, but again, merchandising that call to action to align with those personal values and motivations. Channel, different personality types are predisposed to engage on certain channels over others. Personally, I'm a web and email person, right? Apps may as well be tombstones on the home screen of my phone for as seldom as I use them. I mean, I haven't posted on Facebook since 2009, probably won't ever again, right? But my children, my spouse, all very, very different. So you have to have touch points for where people prefer to engage and where they're already engaging with other brands, rather than trying to, sort of corral all of them to where you might otherwise be. Time, inboxes are becoming increasingly crowded. So knowing when an individual is most likely to open, read, and engage is an important aspect of personalization. And lastly, frequency. Knowing how often to send is equally important. There's been a lot of analysis done over the last few months to show that on average, the market actually has a greater demand for email, not less. The caveat there is they have a greater demand for meaningful value-based messaging, not less. So it's critically important in identifying, the demand for that messaging as well as the actual context and content that drives it. Using all of these in combination allows us to achieve that individualization, that segment of one, by achieving sort of the holy grail here of context, what it means, how it feels, what it signifies.
All right, great. So after setting up this personalization, how on earth do you know whether the campaign or tactic is working, and how do you continue driving incremental growth? So I'll talk through this here, but the answer is ongoing testing and optimization. Okay. So first, let's go through a basic A/B testing framework around understanding whether or not a change is working. So to do this, you're going to need a few things. The first thing that you're going to need structurally is making sure that your customers, your consumers, your prospects are grouped, are randomly assigned into a test group and into a control group. The control group is going to be your set of prospects or customers who are untouched by this new personalized experience, and your test group is going to receive the new experience. Okay, it's really important that as part of understanding whether or not a change is working, a new tactic or channel or campaign is working, that the experience split here is respected and there's no mixing from one group to the other. Okay, then you're going to take your target metric that we talked about before, and you'll want to understand your current conversion rate, which we call the base rate. And you'll set in place how large of a lift you're shooting for. Okay, with these two numbers, your base rate and then the target lift, you can calculate how long the test will take based on how much volume you have within your product. Okay, now the third thing that you're looking for, which is ultimately the 1 or 0, did it work or did it not, is statistical significance. Okay, so oftentimes big lifts can really quickly into a test look and feel meaningful. But because volume is so low, we actually can't conclude that the lift is actually different from 0. Okay, so it's important to reach what's called statistical significance, meaning that any positive or negative changes that you see will only have happened by chance, less than or equal to 1 out of 20 times before considering a test is a success. If you're looking for help doing this, there are a bunch of calculators. You do not have to do this in your head. There are a ton of calculators online that can help with this. cxl.com has a good one that we even use at Mixpanel for quick analysis and sizing. Okay. If you find yourself unable to drive meaningful movement and behavior based on your personalized testing, oftentimes it means that you either need to take bigger bets, make your communication even more personalized, or increase the difference between your groups, your cohorts, or you should revisit the cohorts that you've defined to confirm that they still make sense for your business. Okay, so that's standard A/B testing framework. How do we apply this to an ongoing growth model through experimentation, and what does a program here look like? Okay, so I'm going to walk you through a 4-part structure that we use really effectively at Mixpanel. And in this structure, you're going to want to define 4 things. Okay, the first thing that you need to define is your testing area. At Mixpanel, we call these swim lanes, but effectively, what is the metric you're trying to improve? And you're thinking of this as a specific swim lane that you're moving through constantly. Okay. The next area is the target lift for that area. So an example here would be you say, okay, over the next 6 months or 3 months or whatever time period, we want to move this metric by 10%, 20%, 100%, and you lock this in. This is the target impact, and it defines how aggressive you want to be with your testing. It impacts how you approach the swim lane. You'll then want to define your testing throughput. So within this time period, how many tests do you want to run? Okay, this is a measure of how active, how quickly are you moving, and are you getting the most out of one of the most valuable resources that we have, which is time. And then the final part of the structure is target win rates. Okay, so set what seems like a target, a reasonable target win rate for the test that you deploy based on the impact. Okay, so as an example here, if you're able to run a lot of tests, you may be comfortable placing bigger bets and have a lower win rate, okay? Or if you have a small lift that you're trying to get and you can't run a lot of tests, then you may be shooting for a really high win rate, okay? In general, what you want to use this for is if you run, say, 10 tests and 5 of them were successes and 5 of them they didn't beat your champion, but you learned from them, that's a 50% win rate. If win rates are too high versus what you were trying to do, that can imply that you're not being aggressive enough. You're winning too many tests. You can actually be more aggressive with your testing. If win rates are too low, that can imply that you're gambling maybe a little bit too much in testing and need to take safer bets. or you just want to do a little bit more due diligence in terms of the tests that you're setting up and executing. Okay. Now, the overall thing to keep in mind here is that healthy ongoing growth is really about constant testing and improvement. It's not a set up one test, set up personalization once, and then you're done for forever. It's an ongoing testing and improvement process. So setting up the structure, being aggressive, and then holding yourself and your team accountable for growing the business is going to be what drives a lot of value for you here. You really don't want to get complacent around what you've always done, and you do want to operate with a sense of urgency. Okay, so the things sort of running through your mind, the drumbeat: hypothesize, test, learn, implement, adjust, repeat over and over and over and over again. Okay, so with that, Kimberly, do you want to take us home?
Yes. So here we have a snapshot of the 5-step framework that Garin and Sam covered. You know, I think this year has been challenging in so many ways, and I think having to adapt and pivot in some ways is a silver lining, right? It really makes you take a step back and determine how you can ensure that you're truly providing value to your customers. And like Sam and Garin shared with us, you know, diving deep into your analytics, running those A/B tests, being mindful of relevant considerations as you segment and personalize can all help you achieve that. So if you're curious to see how Iterable and Mixpanel work together to enable you to bring to life this 5-step strategy, you can check out our joint one-pager, which I'll be sharing here right now. And I think with that, we can go into our Q&A portion. So we actually gave folks an opportunity to submit questions ahead of the webinar. So I'll start with those, and then, you know, if any questions come through the chat, we can address those afterwards. So first up, we have 2 questions from Daisy. Thank you so much. First one being, considering the change in consumer behavior due to the pandemic, what metrics and cues should we be looking at? Has this changed in any way?
Yeah, that's a great question, Daisy, and certainly, again, one at the forefront of a lot of people's minds. We named a couple of them a little bit early on. So again, shifts in price point, or I would say uncharacteristic or historically uncharacteristic shifts in price point. Folks were typically shopping above $50. Now you see them shopping in the $20 range consistently. Again, probably a pretty good cue, especially if we see that again across broader swaths of the audience. Shift to lower price points within the same category. Shifts in category as well. Again, are folks moving away from things such as business attire, again, looking at more things like necessities and basic items, loungewear, fundamentals, things of that nature as well. Drops in engagement, so drops in opens and clicks, in completed calls to action, and less time reading, less time spent on per page. All of these things would likely, in combination, indicate that priorities might have changed, but if not for the individual, for the larger audience, there might be more important things on your mind. What I typically recommend in such situations is look for, again, ways to make your product or service relevant against those new priorities, against those new needs. There's tons of examples out there, both on our website. I know Mixpanel has quite a few, and always check out places like Really Good Emails. There's some really great examples there of what folks have done to really pivot and maintain that level of relevance. Sam, your thoughts on that question?
So I'll just add a couple here. So in terms of like the specific metrics, like the overall all-up metrics that people are focused on, retention has definitely increased in importance for many firms out there as they're looking to really just batten down the hatches in the face of uncertainty. So as you just sort of scan the web, you probably see more and more content coming out around retention and people thinking about this. On the acquisition side, my view is that the biggest change here is, while we all still care about acquisition, one of like the sea changes that we're seeing is that the meaning of some of our legacy funnel metrics are changing, just because budgets are uncertain. Consumer or customer or prospect behavior is just changing. Like, people aren't in the office all day; they're at home. They have more time to just consume content around the web and explore products. And with the space generally shifting to more of a digital footprint, just how people are interacting changes. So as you look at your acquisition funnel, every step along the node probably means something a little bit different than what it's historically meant. And so understanding that and responding in as close to real time as you can will drive incremental value.
And the second question from Daisy is, what are some examples of a success story following these growth strategies for a B2B non-SaaS company?
Yeah, another great question. As you're probably aware, customer marketing can be a bit fraud, and so we have to be careful with permissions, what we're available to share here. But I would say one that gives a really great in-depth look is available on the Iterable website is Honeybook. You'll find a full case study there kind of showing the need, goal, challenge that they had, very much as we outlined here, specifically how they combine both Iterable and Mixpanel to meet and those challenges and kind of fulfill the need, and then some really compelling metrics on the success that they saw as a result of those actions as well. So you'll find some others on there as well, probably more than we'd have time to kind of talk through here today, since we know we want to get to some other questions as well. But definitely take a look at some of those case studies. They're a great, exciting bedside read for you in your quiet hours.
Cool. And I'll add on a B2C example from a firm that uses Mixpanel that's a leading food delivery app in EMEA. So they have a restaurant business unit focused on retention, specifically low friction onboarding and generating early orders for mom and pop restaurants being a key driver of that. They've used a number of the principles that Garin and I walked through in the webinar today to build segments and email sequences for their new customers, recommending actions based on early bad feedback that they might receive, as well as recommending different types of food packaging and avenues to go get that as a way to boost
Awesome.
retention.
We also got another question from James, and he asks, with SEO, SEM, and a full marketing mix in place with social, display, and affiliate channels, apart from video production, what is the next big step to take on?
Yeah, so I can take this one. So to me, this sounds like an acquisition question, and specifically around channels and where should we explore next. I'd actually think about this a little bit differently, and this is my perspective on it. So every business is a little different. So I'm going to give more of a general answer here, but it sounds like you have a pretty diverse mix of channels that you're pulling from, which is why you're asking, hey, where do I go next? My suggestion would be to focus more on the process side and mastering the process of iterative ongoing improvement. Do you understand your data? Do you have the process in place to move really quickly, take what you're learning, apply it, understand that it's working, and do that over and over and over again? And I think more of that, whether it's volume or CAC or specific conversion rates along certain steps of the funnel, it would be more on the process side than necessarily like which channel do I try next at this point.
And also from Anthony, he asks, everyone is saying to forget year-over-year performance comparisons, that they don't apply in 2020 versus 2019. Do you agree? And if not, what are some unique ideas you can share for those of us in really hard-hit industries?
Yeah, that's a really great question. It's benchmarks can change often, as folks realize. So I would say I would agree with the fact that we should probably not be comparing 2019 to 2020, other than for the simple purpose of understanding how far things might have deviated from what we had previously considered normal, right? I think 2020, less than being a year of measurement for comparison, is likely more a year of learnings, right? Customer centricity, shifts in digital transformation, these were all things that were happening far in advance of COVID, but it certainly lent a lot of acceleration to the efforts that a lot of folks had in place, or otherwise compelled people to begin sort of their own journey of transformation or customer centricity. So that's really, even though it's a bit of an ambiguous answer, that's exactly what I would say is use 2020 as an opportunity to learn sort of, again, what's most important to your audience, how to actually identify that at the individual level, and then how to, again, contextualize your relationship against what you've just learned. It's the only way that we have to differentiate ourselves from a very, very competitor-rich landscape. It's the only way we have, again, to reach our customers as actual people and deliver against their true needs and wants, right? And most importantly, it's the best way that we can understand and anticipate future shifts and prepare ourselves to meet those.
Awesome. Oh, did you want to add something? Oh, I was wondering if you want to add something to that, or.
I would just say I generally agree with everything.
Perfect. And so I think we're going to flip over to the questions that have come through the chat for the last few minutes we have here. So from Camilla, we got a question asking, when developing segmentation, is there a number of segments I should pursue?
Yeah, that's a great question. I see a couple of other folks asked a few questions kind of similar to that. I would say there's no minimum or no maximum. I think the rule that I use is segmentation is great for audience organization, right? But we want to look to personalization to deliver the individualization of experience. So segments, you can have these as broader as fine. I typically, when I'm working in a strategic capacity or strategy capacity with a lot of the customers with whom I work, I would typically recommend that they look for 3 to 5, right? And again, these aren't things like customer versus non-customer, because to me, at the end of the day, that's almost arbitrary. Here's why. You look at a lot of retailers, actually, you look at anybody with an e-commerce presence, regardless of business model, and most often than not, the majority of the folks in their database are folks who have yet to convert, right? So to me, I don't really agree with sort of parsing those out and really paying more attention to one or the other. It's really understanding what it's going to take for them to convert. How do I figure, my product or service figure in what's most important to them? And then I segment again along those lines of disposition, value, preference, need, or motivation. So anywhere from 3 to 5, and then I introduce as many personalization elements as I can to make the content, subject line, every aspect of my message as dynamic and as relevant to that individual as can be possible.
Yeah, I'd add on to that. I think that the 3 to 5 is generally a good guide with this. The thing that I'll add on here is, depending on where you are in this journey. So if you currently have like the one size fits all model, and a lot of businesses are like this, right? And a lot of folks I'm sure are on today who are thinking through this, like, oh, I have this one size fits all. Start at the lower end, like work your way up. Don't you want to work your way up to 5, and if there are more that make sense for your business, that's great, and that can add value too. But start simpler, bigger cuts, and then work your way more complex. Get those gains early, and then build your way out from there.
And I think Roberto, your question was kind of similar, and I think Garin and Sam kind of addressed it. But if there's anything else in particular that you wanted to hear from them on, feel free to drop that into the chat. So a question from Rick here. What is the usual cycle loop of the test and optimization?
Yeah, I think it might be a little different depending on the technology with which you're working, and certainly the value or particular purpose of that technology. So Sam, I'd love to hear from you first, if you don't mind.
Yeah. So this is a very business specific thing, and the things that move that define the answer to this question. There are a couple things. One, how much data do you have? And I mean this in the sense of not how many like descriptors of a customer do you have, but like how many customers or prospects or whatnot do you have going through. If you're Facebook, as an example, you can run tests on a very short cycle loop, right? Like you can get learnings really, really, really quickly. If you're like a startup B2B product, you may have very little like customer data flowing through. And so like you're just not going to be able to learn test results within an hour like a Facebook will, okay? So the volume of data that you have is going to impact this. And then the other piece that is going to impact this is what type of lift are you trying to get versus your current base rate, okay? So if you're trying to get like double your conversion rate for some interaction point with your customer or your prospects, you can learn much, much faster than if you're trying to get like a 2% lift there, right? And so these things are generally going to move the number. So then it's really a question for you on like, what are you trying to accomplish, and how quickly do you need to learn from this as part of where you are in your business cycle. The thing that I'll add on with this is one of the things that we do at Mixpanel, and this is effective, is because we go through the planning process that I mentioned of like those 4 steps. With every test, we know what we're shooting for. So we have success criteria for any test we launch. You'll be able to get a read within a couple of days or a week, likely, I'm generalizing here, if there's a path to that happening. So if you anticipate it being a 2-week test, and after like a week, you're like, look, we've actually run in the wrong direction here. Like we wanted an improvement of like 30% and we're seeing a 5% decline. Have early like shutdown criteria for the test so you can move on to your next one. And so like if you build those controls in, that helps you improve your cycle time with this, even taking into account the things that I mentioned that influence the time of the test.
That's great insight, Sam. Yeah, on the messaging side, I'd say it's a little bit different. When it comes to your segmentation strategy, I'm tempted to say quarterly, but obviously it's a big undertaking, and frankly, we need a bit of a longer yardstick than 3 months to judge the overall efficacy of our segment. So I would say at least twice a year, probably no more. Every time also there's a shift in business strategy, a significant shift in product offering, or anytime there is a major event going on that might otherwise influence sort of, again, consumer needs, behavior, priority, disposition, etc. So at least twice a year on the minimum, and again, otherwise as needs dictate. Now, with regards to testing, again, the overall efficacy of your messaging programs themselves, the messages and personalization elements, I would say you should be testing in perpetuity, right? For kind of one-off promotional messages, it's really about testing elements, sort of either 1 by 1 or 2 by 2, not much more than that, or it becomes difficult to really determine what is the moving factor there, which one over the other, right? For longer tail messages, so like journeys that might run a little bit longer, things like abandoned cart, welcome journeys, reactivation, I would suggest running multi-armed bandit type of testing and optimization. So this is a type of testing that assumes that the first winning answer may not necessarily continue to be the winning answer, understanding that what creates statistical significance can often be temporally driven and can change over time. So again, testing these things over weeks or over months, seeing how things evolve, and then making the appropriate adjustments as those insights divulge.
Awesome, thanks for those answers. I think we've pretty much addressed all the questions that have come through, and we're at time. So I just want to say thank you to everyone that's tuned in. Thanks for spending time with us. We hope you found this session to be useful. We'll be sending out a link to the recording shortly, so be on the lookout for that. And thanks again, and hope you all have a great rest of your day.
Thanks all.
Thank you.